former chairman, Coal India Limited, who is the theme speaker for today's session. And we are also having with us the chairman of Mechanical Engineering Division Board of the Institution of Engineers, Dr. N.T. Rangareddy, who has joined from Bangalore. And we are having Dr. Nirmal Das, chairman, West Bengal State Center of the Institution of Engineers, and Mr. Bhaskar Datta, convener of Mechanical Engineering Division, West Bengal State Center of the Institution of Engineers, and officials from the IEI headquarters, Mr. King Suk Sen. So now I request our chairman of West Bengal State Center, Dr. Nirmal Das, to kindly deliver the welcome address.
Well,
over to you, sir.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Anirban. Good afternoon. And happy welcome to you all. First, let me take the name of Dr. Hemant Thackeray, our President, Minister of Engineers, our Vice President, Sandeep Kumar Dev, CARTE Chairman, Ranganathan Ji, and our Mechanical Engineering Division Board Chairman, Dr. N.T. Rangareddy, Dr. Raju Bashak, Honorary Secretary of West Bengal State Center, Engineer Bhaskar Datta, Convener of the Division, Mechanical Engineering Division, Engineer Anirban Datta, Joint Honorary Secretary of the West Bengal State Center, and our eminent speaker, Sri Pierce Bhattacharya, who is the former chairman of Coal India Limited, past present council members of the institution, distinguished corporate members, ladies and gentlemen, and the chairman of Computer Engineering Division Subcommittee, West Bengal State Center. It is indeed my great pleasure and honor to be speaking over here today at the celebration of an webinar on the theme, customization holds the key to avoid bumpy transition to net zero, being observed by the West Bengal State Center, Mechanical Engineering Division, the Institution of Engineers. Being the chairman of West Bengal State Center, IEI, it's my privilege to address the gathering of eminent engineers and technologists. On this occasion, let me extend a warm welcome to you all, especially our panel speaker, corporate members, distinguished guests, the staff of IEI, and my beloved students and other dignitaries. From October 31 to November 13, 2021, world leaders converged in Glasgow for COP26, aiming to formulate measures to achieve global climate goals. One of these goals is to reach net zero emission by 2050. Net zero refers to the year by which greenhouse gas emission produced will be balanced by those that were absorbed. At COP26, India announced that it would be net zero by 2070. And by 2030, India, the world's fourth largest greenhouse gas emitter, after China, the US, and the European Union, will generate 500 gigawatt from non-fossil fuel sources. Energy transition in India will be critical to make this happen. Coal India Limited, the world's largest miner of coal by output, has set a largest to become net zero in its operation in 3 to 4 years down the line. In order to minimize the carbon footprints of mining and to progress towards the goal of net zero carbon emission, coal companies are keen to promoting renewables. Coal companies are going for both rooftop solar and ground molecular mounted solar projects. It has also been emphasis to develop solar parks in some of the reclaimed mining areas. Today, we have an eminent speaker, Dr. Parthasarathi Bhattacharya, who was the earlier chairman of Coal India Limited, with us to talk on this issue. Hope all will be illuminated about his lecture, and I hope all will be enjoying his deliberation. So once again, I would like to request to educate ourselves for awareness of this positive mitigation to this climatic change and its impact on our ecosystem to sustain our mankind in this good our art. And thank you and welcome you once again, sir. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman, sir. So now, thanks for your nice welcome address. Now I request Dr. N.T. Rangareddy, Chairman, Mechanical Engineering Division Board of the Institution of Engineers, to kindly share his thoughts. What do you, sir?
Thank you, Anirban Dattaji. Respected theme speaker of the webinar, Mr. Parthasarathi Bhattacharya, former chairman, Coal India Limited. Mr. Bhaskar Datta, business consultant and vice president retired, Tirs Group Industries. Dr. Nirmal Das, chairman, West Bengal State Center. And IEI moderator of the session, Mr. Anirban Datta, CTO, MESA Engineers. A very good afternoon to all of you. Since inception in 1920, the Institution of Engineers India has upheld the mandate of promoting and augmenting the science, practice and business of the engineering through different technical activities and providing insights to the policy makers regarding the matters related to engineering profession, imparting engineering education for working community in non-formal mode, fostering national and international cooperation in engineering and technology, dissemination and sharing of engineering and technical knowledge through activities on contemporary topics, and encouraging, elevating and recognizing the technical knowledge and practice of individuals and organizations through scholarships and awards. Standing at the crossroads of a century of a glorious existence, a little marred by the global pandemic, it was felt appropriate to introspect and disseminate ideas, concepts, and best practices in the emerging areas of technology and engineering through virtual platforms, which finally have evolved into a IEI technical webinar. Today, we are all excited in the prospect of listening and gaining insights from our distinguished theme speaker, Mr. Parthasarathi Bhattacharya, and customization holds the key to avoid bumpy transition to net zero. I take this opportunity to welcome all the corporate members and the practicing engineers and researchers, that this topic will be more portraying the opportunities and challenges in the environmental sector. And I would not like to go through the subject matter. There is an eminent speaker is there to deliver. And also we have Mr. Bhaskar Datta to give a theme of the speaker. With this, I welcome all the corporate members and take this opportunity of our eminent speaker, a former chairman of a Coal India Limited, is going to deliver theme on this. Thank you very much. And I would like to compliment and congratulate West Bengal State Center for taking initiative, very relevant topics for all the engineers, especially in the Mechanical Engineering Division Board. Thank you, Anirban, and thank you, Chairman. And I again wish all the participants best of luck, and they will be enlightened after the listening the speaker end of the session. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. N.T. Rangareddy. Thanks for your sharing of your thoughts. Today, we are not having unfortunately, our president, Dr. Hemant Unkarrao Thackeray. He is traveling abroad. So we are not having him with us today. But he has sent his blessings and wishes to carry out this program in a seamless way. And also, we are unfortunate that our chairman of the Committee of Advancement of Technology and Engineering, Dr. G. Ranganath, he is also out of station with some professional engagement. So, and our Vice President, Engineer Sandeep Dev, he is also trying to join, but due to some technical join. So now I request Engineer Bhaskar Datta, who is also the convener of Mechanical Engineering Division of West Bengal State Center, to kindly introduce our theme speaker on and also share a few words that why we have on behalf of the Institution of Engineers, we have necessitated this organizing this series of lectures on climate change and energy transition. Over to you, sir.
Good afternoon to all of you, and a special good afternoon to Mr. Pierce Bhattacharya, former Chairman, Coal India. And it is really a very, very difficult task to introduce such an eminent and such a widely known person in the industry, Mr. Pierce Bhattacharya. Mr. Pierce Bhattacharya is MSc in physics as well as a cost accountant. And he started his career in Coal India and rose to become the chairman of Coal India. In his tenure, he actually oversaw the IPO of Coal India and possibly remains as the biggest fund generator in the Indian stock market. In addition, he has been a very big proponent of the use of fossil fuel, in fact, especially the solid fossil fuel, and in how solid fossil fuel can actually complement the energy transition for the whole planet, and a specific roadmap for India as a country. India has its own challenges in terms of the population, in terms of the geography, in terms of various other dependents until today. And then from here, how this transition can happen with net zero achievement at 2070 as committed in COP26. So this is a topic. And we organized from the Mechanical Engineering Division, West Bengal State Center, we discussed how can we make it relevant. It is our considered opinion that, and possibly everybody would agree, that the awareness of a net zero requirement for the whole planet and geographical domain of various countries is possibly getting discussed at the aware population, but it is not being appreciated at the ground level. So we thought that why not we organize a series of these webinars, and then each one of us, if we actually propagate the importance of the net zero requirement with the full the knowledge of the country specific limitations and country specific prescription, it may be a good idea. So we organized, this is the third in the series. The first one was spoken by a lady called Elena Dobbs. She actually hails from Arctic region. The second speaker was Mr. Tim Buckley. He is from Australia. And the third speaker is Mr. Bhattacharya. So this actually sets the, and we have an intention of organizing the fourth one. And thereafter, a request to all the theme speakers to come forward in a panel discussion. And from there, a working document, if it can be prepared for India-specific prescription. And we are here now to hear out Mr. Bhattacharya, who is so knowledgeable. And he has been speaking on various platforms about the need for coal to remain for some period of time, and thereafter maybe. But we wish to hear what is his opinion on this subject and how coal can still remain relevant for some couple of years more. So I think with these forward, I think I request Anirban to set the ball rolling with Mr. Bhattacharya to come on board. Anirban? He has gone out, is it? Yes, yes, gone out.
I think we have to request our theme speaker to go ahead with his presentation, and over to theme speaker, sir. I think.
Okay, okay, sir. It is my request that you can start your presentation and you can start your thought process in terms of the solid fuel for this country. Over to you, Mr. Bhattacharya.
Thank you so much. At the outset, I'd like to thank the Institution of Engineers and the distinguished office bearers, Mr. Nirmal Das, Dr. Rangareddy, Mr. Anirban Datta, and my good friend, Mr. Bhaskar Datta, for his nice introduction and for having me here to share my thoughts on this subject of great contemporary relevance. I would go a step further to thank the Mechanical Engineering Division for thinking about the subject in such a manner and for arranging a series of sort of addresses or lectures on the subject that covers the broad spectrum in a 360-degree manner. In fact, I had the pleasure of really learning a lot from the previous two lectures, one from the lady from Arctic region and the other one, the gentleman from Australia. And it gives really a very different perspective of the whole thing. They're looking at the whole subject from a different angle. But countries like India also have their own point of view, which needs to be acknowledged, recognized, and accepted and incorporated into framing a proper roadmap for achieving net zero over a period of time. Let me start by saying that the world today is at a crossroad. Is at a crossroad because of two apparently conflicting challenges. The first challenge is, of course, the climate change. We are witnessing extreme climate conditions in different parts of the world at unprecedented frequencies. Since we are sitting in Calcutta, in a place in Bengal, here, let me start from this place. We all recall that in the two preceding years, 2020 and 2021, we have seen devastating floods that affected many parts of the state, made many people homeless. And these floods used to come earlier also, we have seen these kind of floods, but maybe once in 15, 20 years. Now, two successive years, we have seen it. And we don't know whether we are going to, we can't be certain that we are not going to see it again in 2022 or 2023. It has become much more frequent. Look at the heat wave of April. That was quite unprecedented. And it led to all kind of, created an energy crisis straight away. It affected the whole of northern India. It happened this year. This is again a adverse climate condition. I visited Australia in April and basically in Brisbane. And I was told that just 3 months prior to my visit, sometime in January or February, Brisbane witnessed unprecedented floods. And actually, I could see parts of Brisbane still having the impact, that the trail of the floods is still there, and certain places are not approachable. While we were talking about this, in the month of May, there was again a huge sort of rains and all that. And it was potentially becoming another kind of devastating flood of the same place. Fortunately, the Brisbane city was spared, but some parts in its suburbs actually got inundated and they suffered. So what I'm trying to say is that extreme events, climate events, have become the norm rather than an exception. That is what we are seeing every day. And these things are basically attributable to global warming. That's what scientists have irrevocably linked these things to global warming. And global warming in its turn has been linked to emission of greenhouse gases. There is a clear relationship between the two. It is the cumulative emission of GHG that actually creates this kind of a problem. We understand that the concentration of GHG in atmosphere today is somewhere around 420 ppm, and it is increasing at the rate of 2 ppm per year. And unless we are able to contain it to within 450 ppm, the possibility of keeping a check on global warming to less than 2 degrees, not 1.5, although the target is 1.5, but 450 ppm corresponds to 2 degrees global warming. So even 2 degrees will become very difficult unless we can contain it. And at the rate of 2 ppm, the incremental, the difference between 450 and 420, 30 will take just about 15 years. So we are actually going through a major crisis, and we need to really do something to reverse it. I'd put it this way, that climate challenge was a threat maybe 15 years, 20 years back, or even a decade ago. Today, it is absolutely a reality, breathing down our neck. And we have to tackle this. This is the foremost challenge for the current generation. If they want to have their successive generations or the next generations live in a livable planet, then we have to do something very drastic, concrete about it. And from that, the concept of net zero has come. So this is the first challenge. Now there is another challenge, seemingly conflicting. And that is the challenge of providing energy security to all. I mean, in a country like India, for example, we still have about 20 to 25% of our people without proper access to electricity or power. I mean, that is not acceptable. I mean, that is not a state of development that we can reconcile with. We have to cover everybody. Providing electrical power or providing energy is actually the most sensible, inclusive development agenda that any country or every country will have to pursue and follow. And we can't be an exception, so we have to do that. If we look at our per capita consumption, it is one of the lowest in the world. It is just about 1,200 units per capita. The world average is 3,000. China is at more than 5,000 now. China is a very comparable kind of a situation because of the population comparability in population. The advanced countries start from 5,000, go up to 10, 15,000, something like that. Australia is 10,000. So where are we? We are very low. And if the country develops, this number will have to increase. So therefore, now this increase, how much can be financed? How much can be made out of adding renewables, etc.? That becomes a question. Coming to this part, let us put it this way, that the climate challenge, meeting the climate challenge, the direction all over the world is more or less very similar. What is the world doing, including countries like India? We are trying to have an exponential increase in the renewable capacity addition and also the storage capacity. That is, of course, number one. We are trying to do a phase down of fossil fuel without compromising the imperative need of supplying energy to every section of the society, increasing the energy consumption. We are trying to definitely address the issue of efficiency improvement of power consuming appliances. Because if that improves, I mean, we can bet on that. That is something that can reduce the overall requirement of electrical energy to some extent, or put a check on that. We are all trying to incentivize renewable generation, renewable consumption, various ways of incentivizing it. We are trying to create headwinds for fossil fuel-based power. And the last but not the least is the investments that's happening globally on electric vehicles, your components required for electric vehicles, the rare earths, the mining of the rare earth materials which are going into electric vehicles, etc., and also carbon capture, utilization, and storage. So I think these are the broad themes on which every country is trying to address the problem of climate change. The other one, the providing energy security, that incidentally is an area which has to remain customized for some period to come. Let me give you some examples. For example, in a country which is developed, where the energy requirement is more or less at a saturation level, any addition to renewable capacity could mean equivalent reduction in the fossil fuel-based capacity. That's more or less possible in a country where the energy, which is in a stage of development where there is a saturation level as far as energy consumption, generation, and consumption is concerned. So every addition of renewable capacity may lead to an equivalent reduction in fossil fuel-based capacity. But in a country like India, as I just mentioned, that we are at 1,200 units per capita. If by 2030 we aspire to reach the current world average, which is 3,000, we are sure that even if we can achieve 3,000, we'll have a standard of living which is better than the current world average, because parallelly we will be pursuing efficiency improvement in power appliances, and therefore 3,000 can give us a much more decent standard of living than what the world average today is, because our focus on efficiency improvement has been there, is there, and will continue to be there. So if we want to reach the 3,000, what is required is we have to additionally generate 1,800 units per capita for 1.4 billion population, which amounts to about 2,500 billion units. Now we are pursuing a very ambitious kind of a renewable capacity addition program. The Prime Minister has declared 500 gigawatt to be our target for 2030, up from the current level of about 125-30 gigawatts today. We have done quite well in the past as well, past few years. But here we have to scale up from somewhere around 150 to 500. Even if we do that, this 500 is not going to meet the entire incremental requirement of 2,500 billion units. It is possibly going to meet somewhere around 55 to 60% of that incremental requirement. So where will the balance come from? How will we meet the balance? It has to come from coal-based power. That's the only thing we have. We don't have oil, we don't have much of gas, we have only coal. That's abundantly available. So our dependence on coal will increase between now and 2030, that is for sure. Estimations are that we should be somewhere around 1.3 to 1.4 or max 1.5 billion tons of consumption of coal, up from the current level of 1 billion tons. That is the broad estimate. This is more or less endorsed by the study carried out by Central Electricity Authority recently. They have published their approximate capacity mix in 2030, which shows that the thermal power capacity will increase from the current level of about 200 gigawatt to somewhere around 267, 268 gigawatts. That's by about 33%. Whereas the renewable capacity will grow by more than 200%. I mean, from the current level of 150 or so to somewhere around 450 is CA's estimation, but since the Prime Minister has announced 500, we expect it to go to 500. So even if the renewable capacity addition program is met, that will not be enough to meet the total requirement. So in a country like India, which is not saturated as far as energy requirement is concerned, renewable capacity will act as a complementary to thermal power-based capacity. Thermal power will have to continue for that. Moving to somewhere around 2050, if you look at 2050, maybe renewable capacity definitely will be, if you have 500 gigawatt by 2030, it could be even 2,000 gigawatt by 2050 or so, the maximum that is possible. Even if you consider that, and if you consider that the per capita consumption will move from the level of 1,200 to 3,000 in 2030 and to 5,000 in 2050, which is a very reasonable assumption to make. Even then, you will continue to require a large quantity of coal. There may not be much increase from 2030 to 2050. We may be reaching somewhere near a plateau of 1.4 billion tons around 2030 to 2035, but that plateau will continue for some more time. Nobody can say with certainty that it will not be required I mean, it'll start declining by 2040 or 2045. It's very difficult to say that. The broad theme is that today we are at somewhere around 30 to 70. 30% is non-fossil fuel, renewables, etc., and 70% is fossil fuel. We expect that by 2050 we'll be able to do a reversal of these percentages. So fossil fuel will become 30%, but non-fossil fuel will become 70%. That's the best case scenario that we can think of. Question is that if the requirement moves from today's, let us say 100 to around 500, now the 30% of that 500 is 150, whereas 70% of 100 is 70. So 70 becomes 150, which is doubling. So we'll have to live with fossil fuel. We can't simply move out of it, because if we try to move out of it artificially, then and create a situation where fossil fuel is not to be burnt or not to be allowed, etc., then we may have a problem of making the transition extremely bumpy. And in such kind of a situation, who suffers most? The marginalized people suffer most. So I think we have to think about that and make the transition more smooth by having a calibrated move from maximize renewables, but continue to monitor the requirement of thermal capacity and see how best we can create a balance. Now, some very important points that we need to say is the policy of the, I mean, whatever is followed worldwide, right? Like incentivize renewables and create headwinds for power, for thermal power. That's happening in full measure in our country as well. Let me list out a few things. Renewable power, as we all know, have a must-take status, which means a renewable power unit is generated somewhere. It has a right of entry into the grid. A sort of a, what to say, I mean, it is not restricted by price or something like that. It has a right to be taken straight away. So it has a primary premium kind of a thing. Whereas in case of thermal power, it has to follow a merit order system. So if the particular power that is generated is cost competitive and comes within the merit order system, then only it gets access to the grid, not otherwise. So that is one. For the renewable power, there is no load of transmission and distribution loss. And we know that in our country, the transmission distribution loss is quite an important factor. And that load has to be entirely borne by thermal power. So renewable power is freed from that particular liability. And as a result, that becomes a little cheaper. The fact that renewable power has become cheaper than thermal power, one of the reasons are these things. Then there is a capital subsidy. There are benefits of accelerated depreciation, etc., etc. Contrarily, if you look at coal-based power, coal faces some interesting headwinds. The first headwind is charge on cost of coal, which is charged on every ton of coal that is consumed, both domestic or imported. Something called GST compensation cess. And what is that GST compensation cess? When the GST came in, some states anticipated loss of revenue as compared to the earlier sales tax regime. And the government came up with this compensation fund, from which the states which are having short realization will be compensated. Now that has really nothing to do with coal specifically. But there was a charge on coal, which used to be 50 rupees when it started sometime in 2012. And gradually that has been increased to 400 rupees a ton. At 400 rupees is actually about one third of the pitted price of coal. So that is an additional charge which is levied on coal and which is kept in a separate fund to meet the GST compensation claims of various states. Now, this is quite weird, but this is what it is. And 400 rupees a ton on Coal India alone, I mean, I'm not talking about the others. In fact, if you consider 1 billion ton as the total consumption, then 400 rupees a ton is 40,000 crores of rupees. That is the annual charge on coal. It's a clear headwind. So that is one. Second, traditionally, we are aware that railways are required to practice a sort of a cross-subsidization of passenger fare by coal freight. Coal freight absorbs a part of the cost of passenger fare. Passenger fare is kept subsidized by cross-subsidizing with coal freight. And coal freight is unduly higher as a result of that. In fact, for your information, globally, in terms of rupees per ton kilometer or dollars per ton kilometer, whatever index you want to consider, Indian railway freight is the highest in the world. And there is no reason for that. Indian costs are not the highest in the world, but Indian rail freight on coal is the highest in the world. So this is another headwind on coal. Even the royalty cess, etc., in most of the countries, the royalty rates, etc., are much lesser than what we find in India. So that's again another headwind. With all these headwinds, domestic coal landed price continues to remain cheap in most destinations of the country as compared to imported coal. I'm not talking about the current imported prices. These are extraordinarily high because of some weird reasons. But even otherwise, prior to this price increase, the landed price of coal in every destination in India used to be much less than the international price. That is because of the Coal India's pricing policy. The coal in India is priced in a completely different manner. It has nothing to do with international price. So Indian consumers are by and large, because if we still meet about 80-85% of the domestic of the coal requirement is met from domestic sources. So Indian consumers are by and large insulated from the global volatility in coal price. And that is because of the Coal India's pricing policy. In fact, Coal India's pricing is extremely stable. If you look at the past trends, you will find that only component in coal, landed cost of coal, that has kept on increasing steeply is the railway freight. Otherwise, Coal India's price remains by and large stagnant, because even at this price, Coal India makes quite a handsome profit, can meet the government's expectation of dividends, taxes, etc., etc. And so therefore, it doesn't really need to increase prices. And we take pride in saying, I'm sorry to say that I'm trying to identify myself with Coal India. I'm not Coal India, but the Coal India takes a bit of a pride in trying to suggest that we meet the national objective of generating power in an affordable manner. Because we need to not only generate power, we need to generate power affordably. And at least the pitted price of coal is very much aligned to this particular objective. That is what we had said during the initial public offer, when the global investors sort of tried to corner us, that why should you keep your prices low? We clearly said that this is a national objective to generate power in an affordable manner, and we are proud to be associated, or rather aligned to that objective, and we'll continue to be aligned. So that is the broad purpose. And as a result of this pricing policy, we still don't have a problem. I mean, there is despite the other headwinds that I spoke about, Indian coal prices are much lower in most part of the country as compared to imported coal prices, and the consumers are therefore insulated from these kind of price issues. I'd like to next take you through the scenario, the Indian scenario in coal-based power, what has been happening over the last couple of years. See, we have been witnessing, there has been a general increase in the coal production and offtake, because India depended on thermal coal for quite some time. And up to 2018-19, FY 2019, the growth continued. In 2019-20, that was the first year when something very weird happened. Coal India met, I'm talking about Coal India because Coal India is actually 82% of the total coal produced in the country, produced and supplied, is Coal India. So, and other than Coal India, things are a little unorganized. So we're not talking about that part, we're talking about Coal India. 18-19 Coal India produced 607 million tons of coal. And that was the last year when there was an increase in coal production. Since then, in 1920, the production dropped by 1%. It became about 602 million tons. But the stocks increased, which means the offtake was even lower than 600. 1920, incidentally, was not a COVID year. COVID started in March 2020. So it was without being a COVID year, we witnessed this kind of a demand slump in coal-based power and coal. In 2020, situation continued even worse. Again, there was a 1% drop. And sorry, I'm talking about 2021. There was a further 1% drop. And in addition, we witnessed an unprecedented rise in coal stocks from 75 million tons opening stock to 100 million tons at the end of March 21. There was a 25 million ton increase in the coal stocks, which means there was offtake was 25 million tons lower than production. So production was 596, offtake was 571. And this was one of the lowest offtakes in the recent years. It appeared that the incremental demand of power was possibly being met by renewables because renewable capacity addition had started. And therefore, further increase in coal-based power may not be there. It was as if the epitaph was written on coal, being written on coal. It was quite, and it led to all kind of complacency. The thermal power stations were unwilling to even pay for coal. There was a huge receivable problem that came up. They were not willing to pay for coal because Coal India supply continued under the fuel supply agreement, but that was they didn't require it. The PLFs had dropped to 50-51%. So it was that kind of a situation. The receivables actually mounted to 23,000 crores. Most of the coal companies are profitable, but even then they had to borrow money to pay salaries. That was the kind of situation that happened. So it was quite a sort of a very, I would say, depressing situation for coal-based power and coal, both. Now come 21-22. The first quarter was hit by second wave of COVID, which was a more dangerous wave than the first wave of 2020. In fact, Coal India itself lost about 250 people during that quarter. And the production was affected, everything was affected. In the second quarter, we suddenly started witnessing something what we have termed as post-COVID recovery. And once that recovery started, the trend completely changed. The PLFs in the power station started inching upwards. From 51-52%, it started moving up and moved up to 55-58% or something like that. And that required coal consumption. Coal stocks in the power plant started falling. In the second quarter, Coal India's production was also affected by rains. There was an extended monsoon during that period. So supplies were also restricted. Consumption in the power plant started moving up. As a result, the stock level at the power plants started falling quite fast. And on a certain date in October 21, which is, if I remember correctly, it was the 8th of October, the stock fell to an all-time low of 4 days average all over the country in the power plants. Now, stock below 7 days in any power plant is considered as a critical situation. So if it is 4 days overall, you can imagine how critical it was. So we were standing at the brink of a disaster. I mean, brink of a complete power failure, the country going into dark. Fortunately, that was October, so the rains had receded and the better times had started coming up. And both Coal India and railways, they geared up, they pulled up their socks, and they actually pressed all the buttons possible to improve coal supplies to power stations. Railways took the decision of cancelling large number of passenger trains just to keep the track available for movement of coal. Long rakes were created. 4 or 5 rakes together, bunched up, was sent to particularly the far-off power stations. And as a result, the supply started becoming more than a daily consumption of the power plants at higher PLFs. And as a result, we started getting the situation right. And by March end, these 4 days improved to about 9 days. That was the situation. In April, again, this year, we had a problem of the heat wave. There was again a spurt of energy demand. last year, Coal India could manage. The production didn't improve too much. Production increased by only 4%. What saved Coal India was the high opening inventory of 100 million tons. That was drawn down to the extent of about 40 million tons. It came down to 60. And that's how Coal India could meet the total demand of power utilities. But in the current quarter, I am really happy to share that the production has increased very substantially. And we are witnessing a growth of about 28-29% in Q1 production as compared to last year. And the increased demand has been made largely by producing more coal. So now this situation is seen not only in India, it is being seen in many other countries. In fact, coal has made a comeback, including European countries. Even there, the coal has made a comeback. So are we really threatened that the net zero is not going to happen, or net zero is gone to the wind or something like that? I don't think so. You see, other than in India, in most of the other countries, investment in new capacity in coal mining has dwindled, is not happening. Some increase has started very recently, but largely it is not there. In India also, not too much of new investments has come. New investment has come in the form of this, the commercial mining blocks that have been allotted. There are some investments that are happening, but it is not investment that is actually getting it. The PLFs were low in the power plants. The PLFs could increase. There is no further investment in power plants also. The PLFs increased and coal production had increased, so it could be supplied. So that's how it was met. I mean, we didn't have to create too much of new capacity in thermal power. Now, of course, some capacity creation has started. NTPC, for example, has just reversed its decision. It took a decision a couple of years back that no more addition to thermal capacity. It has reversed it and it's adding some capacities. But I don't think too much of capacity addition will come, because globally investment in coal mining, all the restrictions continue. The restrictions of the financial institutions, etc., will continue. So as a result, the increased demand will have to be met by correction in coal prices, by market forces of supply and demand. And coal prices has shot up, as you all know. Imported coal prices shot up. So that will create a disincentive against coal-based power worldwide. And that will become an advantage to renewable capacity. So renewable capacity addition should speed up because of this kind of change in global ecosystem and supply chain. So as a result, I don't think the net zero program is going to get too much affected. There could be some impact, but not much. So one issue that comes up is in a country like India, where we are quite clear that we have to depend on coal for more time, and we have to increase the coal consumption, coal production, etc. At the same time, most of the rest of the world will move towards net zero over a period of time. So from 20 years from now, what are we going to witness? We are going to see most of the world has moved into renewables and they have shunned coal, and we are consuming more coal. So now there is a challenge. Therefore, we will be exposed to more global criticism unless we ensure that coal mining, coal transport, coal storage, and coal usage, everything is more benign than what it is today. Everything happens with lesser emissions, with least disturbance to the environment. That is what we need to happen to. So in order to make that happen, the most important thing that we need to do is to go for extensive washing of coal and use washed coal only, not the unwashed coal. Unfortunately, there has been a setback in this regard as far as the policy is concerned, because we had a policy prescribed by the Ministry of Environment and Forest that any coal consumed in cities or any coal moving by a distance of more than 500 kilometers cannot have more than 34% ash. And Indian coal intrinsically have much more ash than 34%. And so therefore, washing is absolutely imperative. Either wash or blend with imported coal. This was imperative. But that restriction has been withdrawn. I am not very clear as to what is the rationale of withdrawing it, but somewhere it has given a jolt to coal washing. But I still feel that given the environmental aspect or environmental improvements that are associated with coal washing, both coal consumer and coal producer, I think, should join hands and try to go for large-scale washing as fast as possible. I would say on a yesterday basis, because washed coal is distinctly better than unwashed coal. It has been proven in all scientific studies. We have a particular institute called National Institute of Advanced Sciences in Bangalore, which has done extensive study in this regard. And I'm very happy to share with you that other than reduction in ash, a modern washing technology actually makes a difference in the NOx, SOx, as well as P2.5. All the three things are reduced in the washed coal. So I think that is what we need to do. If we can make the coal usage and even coal movement, because if we move washed coal instead of raw coal, definitely we are not moving the ash. We are at least moving lesser ash. So that makes the transport more efficient and more economically beneficial. So if we go for washed coal in a big way, I think we'd be able to meet the critical environmental activists' eyes over a longer period of time, and we'll be able to continue to use coal for a longer period of time without much resistance. So this is something that needs to happen. One of the major bottleneck for this is our faulty pricing policy. See, we have a pricing policy which is skewed towards lower quality. Our lower quality coal prices are higher, and higher quality coal prices are lower. In fact, if you look at the price in rupees per ton over the power grade range, which is, let us say, something like 3,400 kilocalorie per kg to 5,000 kilocalorie per kg. That is the coal used for power generation. In the entire range, in rupees per ton, the price is just mildly sloping upwards. And it's a straight line. So the moment you make it rupees per gcal, the price is flat. The price of coal, 3,400 kilocalorie and 5,000 kilocalorie per kg, expressed in rupees per gcal, are the same. So this price is same, the patent price, and the other things like your 400 rupees GST compensation cess, that is rupees per ton. So that is actually declining downwards when expressed in rupees per gcal. Railway freight again is fixed in rupees per ton for any particular destination. So in rupees per gcal, it is again sliding downwards. So overall, if you combine all these three components, the landed price at any destination is sliding downwards, which means it is higher for low-grade coal and lower for high-grade coal. So this kind of a skewed kind of a situation, I don't know really why the power producers, power generators are not feeling the pinch of it and trying to press for supply of washed coal. That is one. And trying to go for a pricing system which actually incentivizes coal washing, both from the producer's angle and from the user's angle. So I think I'm coming to the close of my deliberation. Basically, these are the issues that continue to remain important and will remain important for quite some time to come. And we have to move towards net zero, as the Prime Minister has also expressed in the COP26. Maybe by 2070, we'll have to reach that level. The only other point that I want to say is that in order to do that, because as someone rightly mentioned, that net zero means that there will be a gross amount of emissions which will have to be absorbed. Now, technology for absorption, that is something that we should be able to depend on the West. Now, we keep on talking about, differentiated responsibility. So differentiated responsibility in that the responsibility of the West is to provide technology in a viable manner to the developing countries so that more of this carbon absorption, decarbonization through absorption can take place. So I think that is where we need to continue with this dialogue with the West. And I hope that will continue. The Egypt COP27 will take place. The Prime Minister had mentioned about $100 billion a year kind of investment, but we don't see much happening in that direction. So unless that happens, I think the whole scheme of things of net zero may get into difficulty if the required support from the West is lacking. I think on that note, I will finish my talk and I'll be happy to answer questions. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Yeah, we have been all of with the key points you have highlighted. From your deliberation to me, two major points came up. Freight for Indian coal, transportation cost for Indian coal, that is compared to other countries, that is more. Where one component is the coal price of coal and another component the freight of coal, and compared to other countries, Indian coal is priced less but freight is more. So that has practically our Indians perspective. This has been a great. This area can be harnessed for the study of academicians and researchers, that to eradicate this mismatch, I would say. And other aspect which you have excellently pointed out, that low-grade coal is priced more compared to the high-grade, high calorific value coal. So that is also a great fallacy to Indian coal market, Indian coal economy. And as I would like to mention that being both myself and Mr. Bhaskar Datta, we came from, our background is predominantly from thermal power sector, as well as we have been closely associated with other energy, say fossil fuel based energy sector per se. So definitely, like you, sir, we are also strong believer that every country must have its own energy policy as well as energy transition policy towards the net zero and achieving the climate change goals. Because as you have very, very rightly pointed out, sir, that India's per capita energy demand is, again, it is increasing. It is compared to the developed nations, and there is sufficient time to come it to a saturated stage. And as in this series of lectures on climate energy transition, we have our earlier speakers they have practically advocated for the renewables, and practically they have advocated for phasing out or eradicating the fossil fuel based generation of energy. But as far as India's scenario, definitely fossil fuel will prevail, as we have all came to know from your deliberation, and that is the key point. And to you, sir, before we take up the questions from audience, and I also invite the questions from audience, of which our eminent speaker would be delighted to answer and discuss. I have, sir, a few queries to you, that as there has been the prediction that hydrogen is to replace at least 25% of all demand of oil for fuel oil by 2050. And there are practically the possibility that only green hydrogen, which is getting generated from the absolutely biofuels or renewable energy sources by pyrolysis of the water or hydrocarbon generated from renewable energy sources, that green hydrogen or the low carbon hydrogen, which is the brown hydrogen, they offer the only long-term and scalable option for this replacement of fuel oil. And one of the source of generating this brown hydrogen, that is by burning of coal in a gasifier, or what we say as producer gas, so which is used as a fuel for pellet plants or sponge iron plants, and also in many other applications in furnaces, rotary kiln furnaces and other applications. So how, sir, net zero can be applicable, and what should be the government's policy for this producer gas or coal gasification? What should be the government's policy in next few years to promote this as a sustainable alternative fuel and to meet the demand of energy?
Thank you. Thank you for the question. You see, government has laid a lot of focus on coal gasification. coal gasification, in fact, the Prime Minister has announced a target of 100 million tons for coal gasification. We have not been looking at that option seriously over all these years because coal and power were wedded into a sort of a very strong marriage, and no coal was supposed to be used in any manner other than generation of power. That was the kind of thought process in the Planning Commission also. In fact, when there was a decision of allotting 2 blocks, one to Tatas, another to Jindals, for coal to gas in Talcher coalfields, there was a whole lot of uproar that it would mean sacrificing 8,000 megawatts of power generation. How can country afford it? I still remember that kind of a debate. Of course, those are all cancelled because of the Supreme Court judgment. Now, the question is that coal gasification, I mean, is definitely one of the ways of reducing the carbon dioxide emission to some extent. Instead of straight away burning it into a power generation, you take out the chemicals and burn the coke only, and then use it for either steel making or for other purposes in the DRI route or for other purposes. That is definitely a lower emission, no doubt. But I am not sure how viable it is. I have very serious doubts on the viability. Because every time we talk about coal gasification, I have also had some seminars organized by Bengal Chamber and others, where Mr. Jindal and Mr. Sharma, the MD of JSPL, they come and talk. They tend to, always keep on harping on lower price of the input coal. They want coal at 25% cheaper. You see, if a particular process is not able to pay the market price of the raw materials, then it is not a viable proposition. So I don't know how much viable it is. For example, green H2. Green hydrogen means what? Basically, hydrogen is produced through electrolysis kind of a process in all these production, and the electricity comes from a renewable source. Now, if you have created a renewable energy, use it. Why use that to create hydrogen? Just because hydrogen can move the energy. I mean, it helps in transport of the energy. But I am sure that in the process of converting renewable energy into hydrogen, there is some loss somewhere. It can't be that the cost of hydrogen will be lower than the cost of renewable. It cannot happen. Similarly, in the producer gas, burning of producer gas for generation of hydrogen, that also, the viability seems to be questionable. I am making this point just because the people who are engaged into that job, they keep on asking for a special discounted price for domestic coal. The domestic coal is itself at a huge discount to international coal. Now, so if the process is not in a position to bear the cost of coal at the price notified by Coal India, which is one of the cheapest, then there is some question about the viability. In fact, I have floated an idea that, okay, let Coal India be given a share, the differential between the price that you want, the lower price, and the notified price, that should come back to Coal India by way of shares in that particular gasification unit, so that Coal India owns a part of the gasification unit. It becomes a co-owner. So in that process, Coal India also diversifies. But that apart, that could be an interesting point to debate. But that apart, the question is this viable? If something which is not financially viable and technically feasible doesn't make any sense, then you can't do it on scale. You can do a pilot plant. Have I answered your question?
Sir, I got a small. First, I would like to thank former chairman of Coal India, a wonderful, great, elaborative presentation, knowing as a chairman level in all the sectors. So I just want a small clarification and answer from you, sir. Now our renewable energy sources are increasing, and government, we say we are percentage of power generation is getting improved. I think recently Coal India and coal supply has become a topic to discuss in newspapers and all the sites, that there is a lot of shortage of coal supply for power generation, and Just I want your larger perspective, why it happened and why we are spending a lot of money to importing coal from other countries.
Thank you. Thank you. That's a very good question, actually, very pertinent question. See, the issue is, it dates back to, let me give a little historical perspective to this. You know, Coal India was formed through a process of nationalization, etc. It was supposed to meet the demand of all consumers in the country at the point of its formation. And it actually met that kind of a role. I mean, it played that kind of a role till about 1990 or so. In 1991, when the economic reforms took place, one sector that was considered for reforms is the electricity sector, because the government was very keen that capacity addition in the power sector is accelerated through private public participation and various kinds of things. So at that time, there was a study done that in this situation where power capacity addition gets accelerated, will Coal India be able to meet the demand of the power sector? And the answer was a categorical no. Coal India cannot meet, because Coal India will not be able to invest everywhere. So you require other players. And because of that, the Coal Mines Nationalization Act was amended in 1993, which allowed the government to allot blocks to various players. Now, those blocks got cancelled, okay, because of Supreme Court orders and all that. But the fact remains that Coal India will not be able to meet the demand of power sector if capacity addition accelerates. That's a proven point on paper, and it's a report. Now, that capacity addition acceleration didn't happen from 1990 to 93 till about 2007. So the problem never surfaced in those 15 years period. In 2007, the power sector got its act together. And if you see the 11th five-year plan, which is 2007-8 to 2011-12, that is the period where power capacity addition accelerated to 3 times more than the period prior to that. It used to be around 3,000 to 3,500 megawatts every year. That moved up to 11,000 megawatts per year. And in that 5 years, 55,000 megawatts were added. And naturally, the strain was too much. Coal India couldn't meet, and the import started. That is when the import of thermal coal started. Prior to that, there was not much of import of thermal coal. So basically, the inability of the policy to induct more players in coal mining space, that is the factor which became responsible. And we have not been able to set it right till 2020. 2020 is the first time where we have been able to have this commercial mining opening up the sector to commercial mining. Blocks have been allotted. Earlier, some blocks were allotted for captive mining, but that doesn't lead to coal coming in the market. Of course, the government during this crisis period has advocated that even the captive miners are allowed to produce 50% more coal than what they need. So that coal can get into the market. And this has paid off. This measure has paid off. So we are expecting this year a production of about 138 million tons from that segment, the captive power, the captive coal segment. And so quite a bit of that coal, say about 30-40% or 50% of that coal will be available in addition to what Coal India produces in the market. So my feeling is we have delayed the opening up of the coal sector. That is the reason for the continued problem. But since now we have opened up, and this opening up is going to impact your coal availability from 2024-25 onwards. So in 2 to 3 years' time, your coal shortage situation will disappear.
Thank you, sir.
Right, sir. And another question from my side, that as earlier that you have very correctly pointed out that this import of coal, and along with this import of coal, particularly from Indonesian coal, it necessitated that installation of flue gas desulfurization in the existing thermal power plants. But because Indonesian coal predominantly had, it was having high high sulfur content compared to Indian coal. But when this Indian coal, as you have said just now, that by 2025 Indian coal, there will be this, there will be abundant exploration of Indian coal, and it will practically balance the need of importing coal. But then this, because Indian coal sulfur content is very less, practically on an average less than 1%. So whether these flue gas desulfurization projects, which are already undertaken by various generating and utility companies like NTPC and others, so whether what will be the practically prospect of those projects, those installations, will that be in the same manner, or again the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Pollution Control Board, they need to formulate some other avenue, some other set of guidelines to cater that situation?
I think you have rightly said that as long as the power stations are using only domestic coal, the need for FGD may not be much. But if it is blending with imported coal, or it is dependent only on imported coal, then of course FGD is required, because imported coal doesn't, it doesn't conform to low sulfur situation all the time. And as you have also mentioned, that as Indian coal takes over and the import of thermal coal is minimized, should we really go for FGDs in a big way? I think we need to calibrate our policy on adding FGDs. And I hope that will be done, because the government also must be recognizing the fact that as Indian coal covers the gap, too much of investment in FGD may not be really required, and it actually increases the cost of power to the ultimate consumer by 30-40 paise. So it should be used wherever and for whatever period the dependence on imported coal continues. In fact, there are certain thermal power plants which are only dependent on imported coal. There, I don't think Coal India's coal will ever go there, because that's at very far distances, mostly in the coastal regions. So maybe those power stations will continue their dependence on imported coal. So their FGDs will have to be provided. But it's a right point. It's a point of concern that we should not have a blanket FGD policy. Maybe that's not a very right idea to pursue.
Thank you, sir. It was actually this debate we have for your information, sir. We have on behalf of the Institution of Engineers, we have made programs on dedicated programs on FGD and under different technologies as well, wet FGD, dry FGD, as well as semi-dry, covering all the technology providers. But there also that we have always it has been come out said that there must not be a blanket for the entire Indian energy scenario.
Yeah.
And another thing, sir, at this point, this fuel oil vis-a-vis coal in Indian perspective, as we are all we can come to this conclusion that for Indian energy scenario, we cannot eradicate the fossil fuel completely at this point of time. It will take time, and the pricing of fuel oil. So, and as by
your voice is getting, you can't hear you.
That's 4 or 5 years. If we compare between the coal and oil, or coal and oil and gas.
See, coal is basically abundantly available in the country, and we are endowed with enormous resources and reserves, and a lot of resources can be even found out now. I mean, we go for deeper exploration. But that is not the situation with oil. So oil, we have to import crude oil and then only process it for having the other products. So in a situation like that, I would think that we will have to continue depending more on coal and lesser on oil. And in fact, coal and oil both are considered equally fossil fuel. Only gas has a little better acceptability as a fuel, though gas is also a fossil fuel, but gas is considered to be less dirtier than coal. But gas we don't have much, excepting for the KG-D6 basin and some other basins. We don't have too much of gas, and they are also very difficult deep sea basins. So I think we don't have much choice but to depend on coal. But we should use the coal in a proper manner after due washing. And as long as we use washed coal, properly washed, in state-of-the-art technologies that are available today, I think we should be able to continue use of coal without being questioned too much for the negative impact on the environment.
And if, sir, if one side, if we consider decarbonization and another side carbon capture, as far as the coal sector is concerned, whether it is a coal-based thermal power generation or other steel plant and other things, other sectors, so what should be the share of investment? What should be the proper mix of investment between decarbonization and carbon capture?
See, point is carbon capture, we are yet to get a proper foolproof, commercially deployable technology. Where is that? We still don't have that. What we do for carbon capture is basically deep afforestation. That is what Coal India does in a very good manner. I would say it has been extremely successful. And the track record is also very impressive. For every acre of forest land that we have subsumed into mining, we have created 2.5 acres of high quality forest. See, that has been proven by your satellite surveillance and things like that. So track record of afforestation is very good. And that is the only sink that we have been able to create, because we don't have technology for carbon capture or utilization. And we are depending on Western world for providing those kind of technologies. If that technology is provided, I think every carbon user or the rather coal user, particularly the power plants, can make use of that.
So I would now request Mr. Datta to add a few words. Mr. Bhaskar Datta. Mr. Datta, yeah.
Yeah, it has been a very, very enlightening given by Mr. Bhattacharya, and we are delighted to know many, many things in terms of the headwind on coal, and still then the coal is going to rule this country in terms of the energy security. And it is one question which I don't know whether it is right for me to pop it up to him, that the funding people, they are too much bothered about the risk mitigation in terms of investments in coal sector. In whether you talk of mining, whether you talk of thermal power, anywhere, these the funding people are too much apprehensive and trying to put in too much amount of restrictions in terms of the fund availability to these industries. How the industry can thrive in this country with so much amount of restrictions on the fund? Can we have some light on this?
Sure, it's an interesting question. I mean, in fact, it has two aspects. One, in an international context. International context, the problem is quite serious. I mean, funds are really not available for developing a coal mine or opening a coal mine. And unless a company can do it from their own internal resources, even if they do so, they're likely to face serious reservations expressed by their shareholders, the bankers. They would come down heavily. So that problem is there globally. As far as India is concerned, since we know that we have to depend on coal, we are investing. We are developing coal mines. Now, most important point is that Coal India is a government company, and Coal India doesn't have a problem of funding because it has its internal resources, which is very high. It is a more or less a debt-free company. It has a huge debt contracting capacity. No bank in the country will be able to deny loan to Coal India. So with that kind of situation, funding in coal mining in India is not a problem. at least for the present. But globally, it is a serious problem.
Okay.
From
Thank
the
you.
yeah, thank you, Mr. Bhattacharya. So from the audience, we have now received one question, a very interesting question from Mr. Santanu De, that decarbonization will result in penalty in the plant efficiency. I mean, he meant to say some reduction in plant efficiency. Will there be any incentive provided to the power generator by the government in the coming years?
That is for a policymaker to respond. I'm not a policymaker. I'm not able to really answer this question. I don't have any inkling as to what the government is thinking about this. So maybe the question has to be directed to someone more knowledgeable in that particular area.
Anirban, if no questions are there, we can now.
Anirban, if there is no other question, then possibly you can. Anirban, you are muted.
Oh, yeah. Am I audible now?
Yeah,
Yes, yes.
Am I audible? Yeah. Okay. So at this point of time, we are not seeing any other live questions. So if any of the member of the audience would like to put some questions to our eminent theme speaker, he or she may type to the Q&A box. Otherwise, we will move to the concluding part of the webinar. That is the vote of thanks by Honorary Secretary of West Bengal State Center. So I don't think any live question is there. So now I request Dr. Raju Boshar, Honorary Secretary, West Bengal State Center of the Institution of Engineers, to kindly place the vote of thanks.
Is it audible? Hello?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Audible.
You are audible.
Okay. So thank you very much, Mr. Anirban Datta, for giving me the opportunity to propose the vote of thanks. It is a proud privilege to extend my sincere thanks and gratitude to all the distinguished participants in the technical webinar on the theme, Customization holds the key to avoid bumpy transition to the net zero, organized by the Mechanical Engineering Division of West Bengal State Center, IEI, through online platform Zoom. So at the outset, I convey my sincere thanks to the speaker, Mr. Pierce Bhattacharya, former Chairman, Coal India Limited. My sincere thanks also goes to Dr. Nirmal Das, Chairman of West Bengal State Center, IEI, Dr. H.O. Thakre, President, IEI, Engineer Sandeep Kumar Dev, Vice President, IEI, Dr. N.T. Rangareddy, Chairman, Mechanical Engineering Division Board, IEI, Dr. G. Ranganath, Chairman, Committee of Advancement of Technology and Engineering, IEI, the Engineer Bhaskar Datta, Business Consultant and Vice President, retired, ThyssenKrupp Industries and Convener of the Mechanical Engineering Division, West Bengal State Center, IEI, Engineer Anirban Datta, Chief Technology Officer, Messia Engineers and the Joint Honorary Secretary of West Bengal State Center, IEI, who acted as the moderator of this program as well. So the same feeling also being showered to all members of the Council of Division Board, both members of MCDB and the members of the Committee of West Bengal State Center, IEI, and all members of the Mechanical Engineering Divisional Subcommittee, Director Technical, IEI, and his team for wholehearted support. Last but not the least, my sincere thanks also goes to those persons who are behind the screen and giving their silent support to make the program grand success. Thank you all. For this, we are concluding today's program here. Thank you very much, Anirban. And thank you very much,
Thank you.
all of you, those who have participated. Thank you.
Thank you all. And by you, anybody of you want to go through once a day, you can go play through you. Thank you all.